Welcome everyone to today's webinar on the performance and economics of electric weed control in organic perennial crops. This webinar will last approximately 45 minutes, and then we will have half an hour for questions. I'm Alice Formiga of eOrganic, based at Oregon State University. If you have any questions at any time during the webinar, just type them into the Q&A box, and I'll be reading them out loud, and we'll answer as many as we have time for after the presentation is over. So today, I'm very excited to introduce our presenters who are working together on a NIFA OREI funded project about electric weeding in organic perennial crops. First, we'll have an introduction by the lead investigator, Marcelo Moretti of Oregon State University, and then we will hear from some of the amazing graduate students working on this project, Luisa Baccin of Oregon State University, Tong Zhen of the University of California, Davis, and Aleah Butler-Jones of Cornell University. So with that, I am just going to turn off my video and hand over the screen to Marcelo Moretti, who will introduce the project.
All right. Thank you, Alice. Well, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending where you're calling from. It's a great pleasure to have you here. Today, we're going to summarize the work we've been doing for the last 4 years. But before I go any further, I want to make sure I give credit to all the ones working on this project. It's a very large team. Hopefully, I didn't left anyone outside. But I want to give special thanks to Aleah Jones, Luisa Baccin, and Tong, who are the boots on the ground doing the work, as we're going to see in a moment. In 45 minutes or so, there's not enough time for us to compile everything we've done over the last 4 years. So I invite you to check out our website on the eOrganic website, where we're going to have a lot more information, other videos, and hopefully more resources coming up soon as we're starting to prepare for publication of our work. Before I get too much in depth and make sure I don't use more time than I should, I just want to give you a brief outline. We're going to talk about a little bit of the project relevance, results, impact, and leave plenty time for questions, because I hope to have enough of those. So why are we doing all this project? If you're involved with organic agriculture, you probably will agree with me that weed control is one of the most challenging things that we can do. And in perennial crops, even more so, because we cannot rely on specific things like tillage, sometimes flaming as well. So on top of that, labor cost and the shortage of labor really drove this project. And we have other concerns that we're just touching the surface, but it's basically the long-term sustainability. We're using plastic in soil tillage and sometimes, and that may or may not be the best solution. So we're going to look a little bit into soil health as we look into that. There were some work done before this, which we basically evaluated flaming and steam, but the conclusions were either costly or had limited efficacy. So that brings us to electric weed control. So how does electric weed control work? There's a little video here that was made by Luisa. We're generating high voltage electricity powered by the tractor in this situation. And as the electricity is applied to the target plant foliage, we heat the plant from inside out. So you can see these bright colors on the video is basically a higher temperature that the tissue is achieving. And then we're basically destroying cells on the floor, and that energy will move all the way to the roots. So it's very effective in weeds that flaming or cultivation wouldn't be effective otherwise. So with that, with this quick introduction, I'll hand over to Luisa Baccin, who will be talking a little bit about the blueberry study here in Oregon.
All right. Thank you, Marcelo, for the introduction. My name is Luisa Baccin, and I'm a PhD candidate at Oregon State University in the Department of Horticulture. And I'm working under the guidance of Dr. Marcelo Moretti. And today I'm going to present our results on our blueberry long-term response to electric weed control and perennial weed control trials. In terms of blueberry industry, here in the Pacific Northwest area, we are in a key region for U.S. blueberry production, especially for organic blueberries. The states of Oregon and Washington together were projected to produce over 320 million pounds of blueberries in 2024. And it's a common practice at the industry to use mulches for blueberry cultivation. These mulches can be either organic ones, such as sawdust or pine bark, or synthetic ones, such as the weed mat. And they offer a lot of benefits for the crop and also weed suppression. But the use of mulches also brings some concerns. So, for example, when we are using organic mulches, they need to be reapplied every 2 to 3 years to guarantee that they're going to have a good efficacy on weed suppression. And for the weed mat or the plastic mulch, we also can have some problems as the weeds can find a way to pop through it, either through the hole of the planting of the blueberries, or once this plastic starts to get a little bit older and rip apart, the weeds can start coming through it. And then after this mulches, this plastic mulch will likely be replaced. It's going to become landfill and take decades to degrade in the environment. So our goal here was to investigate how would be the integration between electric weed control and mulches to improve a long-term weed control effectiveness and also potentially reduce the reliance on synthetic mulches in the industry. So our research focus was to investigate electric weed control as an innovative, non-chemical method to manage weeds in organic blueberry farming, with specific objectives of evaluating impact on the blueberry growth, also the efficacy of weed control, and evaluate parameters of soil health. We also conducted separate experiments to evaluate the control of perennial weeds, focusing on Canada thistle and yellow nutsedge that are some of the most troublesome weeds we have here in our area. So in order to do that, we prepared our field for this long-term experiment here in the Willamette Valley area in Corvallis, Oregon, where inside of the research farm from OSU, we have a certified organic area where we planted Duke high bush blueberries in the fall of 2022. And in order to test for that integration between electric weed control and mulches, we combine some treatments, including electric weed control at 2 different doses, either 15 or 75 megajoules per hectare, or mowing, and we combine that to the mulch types, either the blueberries planted in bare ground, or with sawdust covered by a weed mat on top. We also included a non-treated control where we don't remove the weeds, just as a reference. Now moving to some of the results we have in terms of evaluating the crop or the blueberry growth, we see that electric weed control did not negatively impact the canopy volume and the length of shoots, the fruit bud set, and the content of chlorophyll in the leaves, and also the content of nutrients in the leaves. To the side of the slide, I have 2 plots, and I'll help you to navigate to these plots to understand our results. So for the first one, we have canopy size. The second one in the bottom, we have shoot length. All these different colors in the bars represent first the gray one, our non-treated control, where we don't remove the weeds, and then either bare ground, sawdust, or synthetic mulch as the mulch types that were used in the different colors. So you see also in the bottom of the plots, the legend with non-treated control, and then the first 3 other bars, electric weed control at 75 megajoules per hectare, followed by electric weed control at 15 megajoules per acre, followed by mowing. The way we can shift between 75 and 15 megajoules per acre is by changing the speed of operation of the tractor, meaning that while we drive the tractor faster, we apply less electricity, or driving the tractor slower, we apply more electricity. Well, what we can see here for our first years of the research is that there is not a clear trend for electric weed control versus mowing in terms of the growth of blueberry plants. However, when we use the synthetic mulch, we can see the purple bars having up to 3 times larger canopy volume and 1.5 times larger shoots. So we can see that there is this trend of using synthetic mulch being better in terms of the growth of the blueberry. So for the weed control efficacy, here we can see this clear trend. We have the same type of graph where I'm comparing the gray bar, the first one, non-treated control, to the different types of mulches and electric weed control versus mowing. Where we can see here inside of the red squares is that electric weed control performed better than mowing for total weed control and also for the reduction on number of species, meaning that when we treat with electric weed control, we have fewer species of weeds in these plots. The same trends were observed for ground coverage and weed biomass. So here to the side of the slide, I have the two pictures and which I took in these plots last year. The first one in the top is when we treated with electric weed control versus the one in the bottom. How does it look like when we just mow down the plots? In terms of soil health, we wanted to evaluate if the electric weed control treatments would have any impact on the soil health parameters. So in order to do that, we collected soil samples and submitted to the soil health laboratory at OSU. And the soil analysis reported that there was no difference on soil properties, including chemical, physical, and biological indicators in the plots that received electricity versus a control plot. This is results for our first year of the research. Of course, the technology has its limitations and hazards. First and most important, we have a fire hazard. So what we learn is that for mid to late summer, when we have a lot of dry weeds in the field, the sparks that are generated by electric weed control applications can start fires. So in order to mitigate that, it's very important that we always have a water source nearby when we are performing the applications, and also preferably perform the application early in the morning when we still have some dew at the vegetation in order to mitigate the risk of fire. Second, and also very important, is a risk of melting the plastic mulch. So in order to avoid that, we should place the application to the side of the plastic mulch and not running on top of it to avoid the melting it. If some damage occur, this plastic will have to be replaced. In terms of perennial weed control, we performed this separate trial to evaluate yellow nutsedge and Canada thistle control, where we compare the electricity with mowing, having different speeds of operation for electric weed control. So either 0.5, 1, 2, or 3 kilometers per hour with different number of applications. So either one application at 0.5 or 1 kilometer per hour, two applications at 2 kilometers per hour, or three applications at 3 kilometers per hour. We also compare the combination of mowing and electric weed control to check what would be the response. So for the above ground control, 70 days after the initial application, what we have for yellow nutsedge control is that our last treatment, that is mowing followed by electric weed control at 1 kilometer per hour, was the treatment that performed better. Since this is a perennial weed that reproduces through structures in the root system called tubers, we collected samples of soil with these plants. So we washed this sample, removing all the soil, keeping the roots. We removed the tubers from these roots, and we planted these in the greenhouse to see if electric weed control treatment would have any effect on these structures. And what we saw was that, yes, applying electric weed control can reduce the viability of these tubers in the roots. So either the treatments 0.5 kilometers per hour, which was our slowest speed that we tested, or mowing followed by electric weed control at 1 kilometer per hour, were the treatments that had a significant reduction on the count of emergent plants. In the same field, we also had Canada thistle, so we could evaluate the above ground control of Canada tissue in that trial. And here, what we observed was that either applying 3 times at 3 kilometers per hour, or then mowing down, followed by electric weed control 4 weeks after at 1 kilometer per hour, were the treatments that performed better in terms of above ground control. We conducted separate trials to evaluate the regrowth of root fragments of tissue. And I have the photos in the side of the slide, so we can see the photo in the middle represents electric weed control, and the photo in the bottom is our non-treated control. So I collected the root fragments, and I planted 10 root fragments in each flat. We can see that when we had electric weed control, we significantly reduced the emergence of new Canada tissue plants. So for the first 2 years of our research, our results show that electric weed control had no negative impact on crop or soil health. It provided much better weed control compared to mowing, with no distinction for dose. And that this study suggests that electric weed control was a promising non-chemical option for weed control. Our next steps right now are to validate this technology in commercial fields. We are currently analyzing the data for our second year of the trial, and we are conducting this trial as a long-term study to evaluate the impact of that in the yield of the blueberries. So with that, I would like to leave here my contact information if you guys want to reach out to ask any questions, and I finish here my part. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Luisa. If you could just stop the remote control there, then I will hand over the presentation to Tong Zhen.
Thank you, Luisa. Thank you, Alice. So hi, everyone. My name is Tong Zhen, and I'm a PhD candidate from UC Davis under the guidance of Dr. Brad Hanson. And yeah, I've taken up the UC Davis side of this project. And okay, so let's just some background. So we did a lot of research in almonds, because almonds is the number 3 in the top 20 commodities in California. And the other top two are dairy products and grapes. And then also California is ranked number 1 in organic production. We have the most organic farms. We have the most certified organics acres. So it's really we need a solution to how to control weed in organic ways. And then for my project, our general objective is we want to develop a recommendation for California growers to use this approach in fruit tree production system. And we use almonds as an example. And then for M1, M2, we want to develop when you should use this approach, for example, in the morning, in the afternoon, and what kind of intensity you should use, what kind of speed you should use, and which species you should target, and how the environmental condition will change your plan to use this approach. And then we also want to see how this approach will impact crop safety, soil health, and how maybe they will change the weed community composition in the orchard. So in my plots, we have an organic almond plots in UC Davis. And here I want to point out that we use drip irrigation in almond orchard in my plots. And then we use 2 different irrigation systems in 2023. In 2024, we switched to subsurface drip in 2024. And keep in mind, and that might have a different impact on the result I'm going to show you in the next slide. So for experiment design, in our almond orchard, we're testing 4 electrical weed control treatments, and those vary between. We use different speed. For example, we use 0.7 miles per hour or 1.4 miles per hour, and then for our model, we can switch the power of the settings. But I think for the commercial model, you better not to mess with the settings. But for our research purpose, we use high power, low power and then we also increase the time you go through the same plot to try to increase the total energy you put it into the soil. That's why in some treatment we run the Zazo like 2 times in 1 day. And then we also have the standard treatment, which is we use this like hand weeding or mowing to just do a maintenance weed control in our plots. And then we apply electrical control 4 times in 2023 and then 7 times in 2024. And we don't have any application during the rainy season in California. And then the data I collected, I recorded the tree height, like how tall the almond trees are, and the tree trunk diameter. And then for soil health, we measure soil respiration, which is an indicator to see how active the soil microbes they are. For example, when you want to estimate how many people in a conference room, you measure how much CO2 they, like the human produce, and you will use that indicator to estimate how many people in that rooms. It's the same logic applied to soil microbes. And then I collected soils only in the 2 high energy input treatment because it's just preliminary data. If we see no effects in those high power treatment, I doubt that like we will see also have impact in the low power treatment. So we just want to save some time. And here is our result for the crop safety. So trees, like I collected data at time 0. So, and in the x-axis, you will see days after transplanting. So we transplant the tree, like I measure the tree and at day 0, and then also in October 2023, and then October 2024. So you will see the x-axis as days. And then in the y-axis, you will see tree trunk diameter in millimeters and height in meters. So when you look at this graph, as you can see here, the standard, the 2 standard treatment, they are in the middle of the plot. And from my statistical analysis, they have no significantly different, which means those treatment does not have impact on tree growth. And our almond trees, they are newly planted almond trees. So even for young trees, they don't have impact. And we doubt that they will also have impact on older established orchard. So this is the crop safety data. And then for soil respiration, which is an indicator for soil health, on the left-hand side, that is the sample taken in 2023, and then it's 14 days after treatment. And then at the x-axis is the treatment name. So high means high power, 0.7 miles per hour is the speed, x1 means we treated this plot 1 time at that day, and then times 2, which means you treated 2 times in that day. And then in the y-axis is just soil respiration, the standardized units. And then as you can see, you don't see any significantly different within the treatment. And then on the right-hand side, we try to see the instant impact of this approach to the soil microbes. So I took the soil samples right after we treated the plot, so which is like 0 days after treatment. We also have a 14-day after treatment in 2024, but I'm still waiting for the data come back, so I don't have that right now. But as you can see here, for short-term impact, there's also no impact on like among the treatments. And then as you can see here, if you compare the 2 y-axis of these 2 graphs, you will see the amount of CO2 they produce is like, on the right-hand side, you see a lot, like 20. And on the left-hand side, you will see like the most are 3. That's because the sampling times are different. On the left-hand side, September 26th is still very dry in California. So you don't expect a lot of activity from the microbes, because microbes, they need water, they need a cool temperature to let them be active. And here on the right-hand side is in November, it starts cooling down, and then it start raining. So that's the difference between the range. And then for the weed control efficacy, I want to show you some pictures. So right now I'm going to show you 9 pictures of 3 trees at 3 different times. So for first picture here, and by the way, this is the plot, and then these pictures show that in the highest energy input, which is we use 0.7 miles per hour, and then with high power, and then we treat it 2 times. So you can see this the strip here, right? Those like dead plants, brown residues, and then so as you can see, when we apply the Zazzle treatment, we try to get as close to the tree trunk, so you will see we can almost treat it all the plants in the growing areas. And this is the highest input, and this is the first application of the 2024 growing season. You see in like the area behind the trees is like a jungle. That's why like this is the first application in this year. So next picture is the lowest energy input, which is we use higher speed and lower power. As you can see some weed escape from the treatment, and then they keep growing. And then obviously it's not as good as the one with highest energy input. So this is the lowest energy input, and then this is the standard. It's like a jungle. And yeah, here I haven't like hand weed or anything like that. This is like the beginning of the trial of 2024. And then when we look at the same trees in August, and then this is also 3 days after treatment, you will see almost bare ground here. One reason is that and it's so hot in California in August, and then also we use subsurface drip. So as you can see, you don't see any like vegetation growing within the tree lines, like right next to the tree. And you can only see residue. Those are the dead plants. Those are grasses. This is the highest energy input. And by the way, this is the same tree as we saw in the last 3 pictures. And here is the lowest energy input. And we use higher speed. And then there's also plant escape from the treatment. And yeah, it's just not as good as the highest input for energy input treatment. And this is the standard. This picture, I took it right after I string trim the plot, and you will see the residue here. And for perennial weeds like field bindweeds and nutsedge, you will need to like string trim like every 2 weeks to make sure they don't grow too big. And this is August. So and then we turn into October, and this picture, I took it 30 days after the last treatment. I think this is the second last treatment in the season. So as you can see, from the highest energy input, the field bindweed just start growing after 30 days after the treatment, which means you can almost like you can keep your field clean in like 30 days, and you just need to retreat them every 30 days in California to make sure. Yeah, and in California, we like to keep the floor clean with no vegetation. And this is the highest energy input. And then the next here, you will see the lowest energy input. And then this is also 30 days after treatment. You will see the weeds are still growing. And then this is the standard plots. And then once you get into September, you have to string trim every 2 weeks. So this is 14 days after treatment. And then I need to do the trimming again after I took the pictures. So you will see here how different the weed size is in these 3 different plots with different treatments. And you can see here, you will only see like here in the lowest energy input, you will see more wheat species, and then in the highest energy input, you will only see field bind wheat, which is the problem, like the most problematic wheat in California. So summary, so in our first 2 years data, we don't see any impact on young almond tree growth. And then we also don't see any impact on soil microbial activity in California soil, but we still need more further research for complete analysis. And then from the pictures I show you, at least in California, electrical weed control can minimize weed biomass for up to 30 days. And to be honest, like for some plots, they can even for up to like 40 days, but that depends on the plot. But average is like 30 days, and then you need to retreat it again to make sure your the biomass of the weed won't affect the tree growth. And then in California, because we have a long dry summer, we will do experiment to see how different soil water content will affect the efficacy of electrical weed control. Because just imagine like if the soil are too wet, for example, right after you turn on the irrigation system, or maybe like right after you finish your irrigation regime, that's too wet, and then and that will draw the power, and you will just bog down your tractor. And then, so in California, we'll do more research on soil water content, but stay tuned, and then we will have more result next year. Thank you.
Okay, great. And so then I'm going to give the control over to Aleah.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. Perfect. So my name is Aleah Butler-Jones. I'm a PhD candidate in the Sosnovsky Lab. I work under the supervision of Lynn Sosnovsky at Cornell University. And today I'm going to talk about weed and soil biological responses to zaso electrical weeding. So just to start, New York is a major fruit production state, just to give some overview. So in terms of grapes, we have over 14,000 hectares. We're the third largest grape producer in the United States. And then apples, we're actually the second largest apple producer in the United States. And that we have over 18,000 hectares, and we're valued at over $344 million as of 2021. So moving forward from there, as we all know here, that there are issues. Weeds are a major problem in organic perennial cropping systems and any type of cropping systems. And in our northeastern production systems, organic managers tend to use cultivation, some type of physical disturbance, and sometimes in addition to mulching, flame weeding, organic herbicide application, but that's limited for several reasons, including the fact that they're rather expensive and aren't the most effective. And then if things are particularly dire, then we use hand weeding, which is extremely expensive due to the labor requirements. So for several reasons, as Marcelo, Luisa, and Tong mentioned, there has been this growing interest in novel weed management technology, specifically electrical weeding, which I'm going to talk about from a New York context in apple production systems. So just so you have an idea of what it looks like over in New York, this is a video showing the zaso, the unit we use running in an organic apple block at Cornell University in Ithaca, New York. So as you can see, we basically drive it down the middle of the roads and then run those electrodes along either side of the tree row. Sometimes people expect to see these sparks and flashes. Where the West California is rather dry, New York is actually pretty wet. So we tend not to have that issue at all. And if anything, the issue can be sometimes that we can't get in the field if we've had too much rain. So For my specific projects, the research objectives that we were trying to address, at least in terms of the data I'm going to share today, were two. One, to evaluate the impact of electrical weed control on weed cover and biomass compared to current organic practices using apple production, specifically cultivation and organic herbicide use. And then two, to assess the impact of electrical weed control on soil and vertebrate communities in terms of abundance and diversity, and then soil microbial activity. To do this, in 2023, we conducted field trials to evaluate the impact of EWC, or electric weed control, on weeds and soil biological characteristics. Pretty much to assess these characteristics, we had separate treatments. So for our soil biological characteristics, we actually ran the unit in basically without a crop being present. And then we focused on weeds and impacts on crop in an apple orchard trial, or two of them, one in a mature orchard and then one in a younger orchard. So for our mature orchard trial, we had 3 treatments that we applied once a month. That was electrical weed control, we standardized speed, standardized setting. Cultivation, we used a commercial cultivation unit called a Wonder Weeder, and then an organic herbicide application. And then we also had a stack tactics trial in which we had 4 treatments of EWC by itself, cultivation by itself, a combination treatment of we electrically weeded, and then within a week we came back and cultivated, and then we had our non-treated control. For our bare ground treatment, we tested combinations of unit amperage setting and speed, and then we compared that to a non-treated control. In addition, we took soil samples from our treatment extremes, just to save time, but also because we didn't expect to see differences 1 day after treatment and 3 weeks after treatment. And today I'm going to focus on that 1 day after treatment, those 1 day after treatment results. So on to the juicy stuff, the things that you're actually really interested in hearing. So first, we're going to talk about how well the Zaso Electro Herb Weeder performs compared to commercial cultivating units in organic herbicide use in organic apples. So the figure on the left is showing that the Zaso electrical weed control unit running, and the figure on the right is showing our cultivation piece of equipment, which is a Wonder Weeder. So onto some results. So we found that electrical weed control significantly reduced weed cover compared to cultivation and organic herbicide use in an established orchard system. So what this figure is showing is our percent weed cover in response to weed management tactic over the entire treatment season. On a y-axis here, we have percent weed cover, and on our x-axis, we have our day. You should also see these gold arrows, and each of those represents the monthly application event. The black line is showing percent weed cover for our organic herbicide treatment. The gray is for cultivation, and the red is for electrical weeding. And what we found is that when averaged over the season, we see these reductions. We see significant reductions in in percent weed cover, followed by cultivation with our highest percentage of weed cover observed in our organic herbicide treatments. You might see this gap right here in terms of a delay. Basically, this was in response to a major rain event. But once we got back in the field, we observed this separation again between treatments. Then we measured weed biomass at the very end of season, and we observed that electrical weed control significantly reduced weed biomass compared to cultivation and organic herbicide use. On our y-axis, we're showing dry biomass in terms of grams per quarter meter square. And we have our treatments along the x-axis with organic herbicide in black, cultivation in gray and EWC in red, but it's rather narrow, the range of data we observe, so you can't really see it. And again, you see this, we observe the highest biomass in our organic herbicide plots and our lowest biomass in our electrically weeded plots with cultivation in between. I will say that this is showing biomass on either side of the tree row. In terms of in-row weed biomass, we didn't observe any treatments between, we didn't observe any differences between treatments. In regards to our stack trial, we saw that EWC might actually be even more effective when used in conjunction with other weed control tactics. So this graph here is showing percent weed cover 23 days after treatment, with our the black bar showing our untreated or non-treated control, the gray bar showing our cultivated treatment alone, the red bar showing our electrically weeded treatment by itself, and then this sort of orangey brown bar is showing the combination treatment. And we see that some type of management we observe significant reduction in weed pressure represented by percent weed control. However, the combination treatment resulted in the lowest percentage of weed cover, at least significantly lower than our cultivated treatment and comparable, if not lower, than our electrically weeded treatment. So now we're going to talk about some soil biological characteristics, as I have a feeling a number of you are interested in. So I want to stress that this is preliminary data, and I'm currently in the process of analyzing it. But what I will say is that preliminarily, electrical weed control had limited impact on soil microarthropod abundance and soil microbial activity 1 day after treatment. In the soil microbial activity, we're using respiration as a proxy. And focusing specifically on soil microarthropods, we didn't actually observe any difference in total microarthropod abundance, columbella abundance, mite abundance, or mite abundance. However, there was this exception in which we observed a reduced or batted mite abundance in the most intensive EWC application. So as shown in the figure on the right, this is showing or batted mite abundance 1 day after treatment with abundance in terms of individual per kilogram of soil on our y-axis, and then our treatments on the x-axis. And what we observed were significantly reduced or batted mite abundance in our most extreme treatment, in terms of we ran the unit very slowly at our highest setting compared to our non-treated control with our intermediate treatment, or rather our less intensive treatment acting as an intermediary. I can speak more in terms of why do we think we're observing these differences if people have questions about this. But what I will say is that I have data looking down to morpho groups, but basically species level. And we want to see if there's actually specific species that are more directly impacted. In terms of soil microbial activity, we didn't see any significant differences in the flush of soil microbial respiration. However, I also have data that looks at soil microbial activity over about 33 days of measurements. So that will, I can update you on that as we get more information. So again, more in-depth analyses are being conducted to elucidate the impact of electrical weed control on soil biological communities. However, the preliminary results are favorable. So the main takeaways that I want you to leave with are that: 1, electric weed control significantly reduces weed cover and biomass, and it may be more effective when combined with other tactics such as cultivation. And 2, electric weed control seems to not affect soil microarthropod abundance, excluding or batteds, but further analysis is needed. In terms of next steps, we're repeating and expanding these experiments in 2025, in addition to assessing the impact of electric weed control on weed pressure in crop health in a newly planted apple orchard and newly planted vineyard in response to mulching and organic herbicide use. With that, I wanted to thank you for your time and thank my lab and the Moretti and Hanson labs as well. And I'll turn it back over to you, Marcelo.
Thank you, Aleah. Let's see if I get control over these slides here. I see a lot of questions online. I've been trying to answer those. All right. I don't want to repeat much of what was said, but I want to just highlight some important accomplishments that we did with this project. The first one I want to say is that this was a catalyst for electric weed control, at least in 3 crops. When we started that back in 2020, 2021, most folks were not even aware of electricity as a method of weed control. Now we have quite a few growers interested. So the awareness has been very good, and we're seeing positive results so far. There's also a growing interest by other cropping systems, vegetables, ornamentals. And these, I'm very proud to say that this technology is now commercially available, at least here in the Pacific Northwest, Oregon, and Washington in the US. It has been commercially available in Europe and South America for quite some time. And we are working with one of the companies, but there are quite a few. I'm aware of companies now in New Zealand, US, UK, more in Europe. They also have similar, not the same, but similar approaches for electric weed control. In Oregon and Washington, we're seeing either you can buy the unit. I saw a lot of questions about costs. One way would be to buy the unit. Will vary widely depending on the size of the unit you're buying. This specific one that I'm showing is a 30 kilowatt unit, so you need about 80 horsepower tractor. And then the PTO is what generating the power for that unit. There's fee for service as well starting here. I don't know how long it's going to stay. Maybe more companies will show up. We're also working with startup companies that have different approaches, post-electric field or direct energy. And this is the part that I want to say, I don't think I covered enough early on. The unit we were working on is one of the early versions. So it's an alternate current. We don't really have means to control or to set up or adjust the energy according to soil conditions or weed conditions. It's very manual. The new versions, like the one shown on the picture, is a direct current unit that on the fly is adjusting the current needed depending on the situation of the soil. So it's basically comparing, if we were talking about cars, we have a manual transmission car versus an automatic transmission car, much more user-friendly, the second version. And the other companies coming up would probably have even different ways of doing so. On the next slide, please. I want to leave plenty of time for questions. But before doing so, I want to make sure I thank all the growers that hosted those trials. I know one of the first questions there was if electricity is likely not to impact crop safety, why are we spending so much time on that? Well, that was the assumption. But I would say with the cost of production for organic blueberries, not knowing if the technology is safe or not, it's a big assumption for a grower to invest equipment. So that's why we spend all the time. And by the time we started this, we were not sure about the outcome. So AgriCare and other growers were the ones allowing us to do testing in their field. So thank you so much. And thank you, NIFA, for the funding. And before I take even more time, I'll start answering questions.
Thank you very much, all the presenters. And we're just going to move on to our Q&A. We have a lot of questions. And I just wanted to let you know again that we have a website for the project. eOrganic.info/electric weed control. There's a QR code, and then there's also the link, which you can copy on the slide here at the bottom. So with that, I'm just going to open up the Q&A box here and move on to the questions. Starting with the first question here, was there an impact on the blueberry yield rather than the foliage?
I can take that. So these plants were planted in 2022. So for the 2023 and 24 years, they were still too small and young plants. So the recommendation was that we prune these plants not to produce. so they could establish establish the root systems. So we are gonna harvest yield for these plants for the first time now this summer in 2025. So that's why we don't have yield data. We only have foliage and canopy size data so far.
Okay, great. And okay, so here's a question about soil health, and I know you're still working on that, so you'll get data over multiple years. But someone asked here, what would not the largest difference in soil health occur over multiple years due to the elimination of plant root exudates? So effects between mowing and electric weeding would take some time to show up.
Yes, that's correct. That's what we expect. So that's why we are having this trial as a long-term trial to evaluate that. So for the first year, we did not see any difference. We are still working on the data for the second year. We just got this, the results a few weeks ago. So we still didn't evaluate that. But yeah, that's what we are expecting. We're expecting to see much more difference over the years. Especially due to removing all the vegetation, removing all the weeds in the weed control plots versus the mowing one.
Okay, great. Let's see. Here's a question about Tong's presentation. Do you think that subsurface versus sprinkler irrigation would affect electric weed control? Let's see, weed control efficacy in controlling the weeds or tree damage in orchards in the, let's see, in addition to the effects of the soil water content?
Yes. But like we still don't know yet because I'm going to run that kind of experiment this in season 2025, and the way we control different soil water content is just to use different irrigation regime like subsurface and surface drip, and then a sprinkler. Yeah, because like that, for sprinkler you would create like a super wet surface, but underneath is maybe not that wet. The soil content might be a little bit low. And then for surface and subsurface drip, they might have different soil water content in different level. And that might also affect like, because if you have the root zone wet, you might damage the almond trees, for example. But yeah, but from the 2 years data, and then we also, when we apply the electrical weed control treatment, we try not to apply the day after irrigation. So we try to avoid that. But so far, we don't see any impact. But we're running an experiment this summer to look at it. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Let's see.
Alice, I might, if I could chime in on that as well,
sure.
if you don't mind.
Mhm.
But there's the question that Tong's wanting to address with that is both soil moisture status and plant water status, because that has a direct impact on how the plant tissue conducts electricity. So I think that's one of the things that we can manipulate in a dry environment like California that maybe Aleah is not going to be able to do at Cornell, because it has to do with how far the electricity transmits through the plant. But definitely sprinkler irrigation or overhead irrigation will have more weed pressure, which has a direct impact on the efficiency of the electrical weeding. And the soil moisture. Tong mentioned this too, but where the soil surface is wet, that definitely draws a tremendous amount of power from the generator, and it really slows the whole process down.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. How does soil respiration relate to plant growth and weed growth in September versus November?
I think maybe this question for me. So soil respiration is indicator for soil microbial activity, like how active the soil microbes they are. And soil microbes, they are the let's say they're the workers to make like a nutrient, and that nutrient will somehow affect the tree use. And then I think that's the like soil health problem. And yeah, does that answer your questions? But like you won't immediately see the difference on trees and weed growth, because those are the process. They are the workers to 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 change something into like available nutrient for crops and weed to use.
Okay, Great. Let's see, we have a number of questions about the device and the specifications and the availability and the cost. And maybe someone can discuss something about that. But also, I just want to let you know that in the chat box, we had a representative from ZASA, one of the co-CEOs that are here. And so if you have, after the webinar, specific questions about that, he put his contact information there. And that's the device that was used in these experiments. But Marcelo or anyone else, do you want to talk
Yes,
at
I
all
can,
about
I
the
can,
device?
I
Yeah.
can try to answer the question about cost. So just so you know, my qualifications are not as an economist. We do have an economist in this group that's working on the data, crunching the data. But so far, what I've been able to say is with this specific unit here, depending on how fast you go and how many hours a year you're operating, it's safe to say that we are somewhere between $50 to the acre, all the way to $100 to the acre. The lower you are, the less you use. Assuming you're buying a brand new tractor dedicated just for these operation, you're buying a brand new equipment, and the prices are fluctuating, as we know, with inflation. So the point that I want you to think about that we are showing is that as we're starting using electricity, the weed density is declining drastically. So it's a little bit hard for us to point and say, just look at the price per acre, because your demand for weed control is likely to reduce over time. We'll get a bit cheaper. It's a kind of moving target to do the calculations, but I would say between 50 and 100, we are sometimes cheaper than some of the other methods, definitely cheaper than organic herbicides, if you compare to caprylic acid, for instance. And we are treating, the downside, we're treating a small section of the field. We're treating about 4 feet at a time, either 2 feet on each side or 4 feet continuous.
Okay. Let's see. Are you expecting the impact of the weeding technique on microarthropods to be direct? In other words, the weeding kills them, or indirect, reduced vegetation as a poorer environment for them to survive in?
I can
Yeah,
answer. Oh, somebody's answering.
um, I was gonna tackle that, but I can leave it up to you, Marcelo.
No. I was just gonna say, when we started, we thought it would be direct on the microorganisms, but now we know a lot more, and you are the person to answer it.
Mhm. Yeah, no, that's a really great question. I would say that is still somewhat unclear. I would think that there's definitely indirect effects in terms of just regarding in relation to soil organic matter and exudates and detritus and things of such. So it's interesting that, to me, and again, I want to stress that this is preliminary and I want to be even more specific with the data, but what I do feel comfortable saying is that batted mites, observing that difference there, batted mites tend to be very responsive to soil organic matter, soil moisture, and it will be interesting to see, compare that to our soil moisture data as well, and see, is that potentially what they're responding to, with changes in soil moisture or perhaps changes in availability of carbon. I have, which I will be analyzing because I both have respiration data, but I also have microbial biomass data as well that I am in the process of analyzing. So I would say, I would think it would be more indirect in response to the plant community shifting, but we cannot say one way or another for certain.
Okay, great. Okay, we had a question about what organic herbicide was used.
In my trials, I use suppress, and the active ingredient in that is caprylic acid. And it was applied once a month, just like any other treatment.
Okay, great. Let's see, is there any type of unit for an ATV? Does anybody know?
There used to be one from Rootwave, but I couldn't find it on the market anymore. I know other companies are developing it, but I don't think it's available as of now. But I've been asking for one for quite some time. Maybe they can hear me now.
Okay, yeah, you said something about handheld units too. Is there anything like that available?
No, it's still in the making.
Yeah.
If anyone
Okay.
can correct me, I would love to hear a yes.
Okay. Let's see. This is another question for Aleah. Aleah showed the additive value of electric weed control with cultivation. What about mowing first?
We didn't actually try mowing, and so I can't necessarily speak to that. I would say it might be useful. One thing I can say is that anecdotally, the tractor operator, the farm manager at the Cornell Orchards, he did find it was easier to cultivate in the areas in which we ran the electrical weeder first. So he found that he didn't have to focus so much on like maintaining the tractor direction compared to when it was just cultivation by itself. So we want to look more into that as well. If anyone, in relation to that, if anyone has any questions about like fuel usage and time to apply these treatments, I answered that in the Q&A, but basically the long and the short of it is using the Zaso was much slower than cultivation. It was 45 minutes to treat 3 rows compared to 10 minutes, and it used significantly more fuel of 2.7 gallons on average compared to 0.3, 0.4 gallons of fuel.
Okay, great. Thank you. Let's see. Would costs also reduce between the constant power AC and the new DC unit, which is sensing power use?
I can try to answer that. I don't know. Is it the cost of the unit? The unit will probably be more expensive just because of the amount of technology that's now packaged on that. You have a computer controlling it. But if the amount of energy applied, I don't know. I would love to do a side-by-side study. But I don't know what's the cost referring to. I'm assuming financial cost. Maybe you can go faster and would be cheaper per acre, but the unit itself, I expect to be more expensive.
Okay, and where are you measuring the soil microbial respiration directly after treatment? Oh, let's see. Aleah just answered that question there, but it says, where are you measuring soil respiration directly after treatment as a response to the newly dead plant roots being decomposed?
So that could be in a sense of you tend to see there. Let me think. Yes, you would. It would not be surprising to see a difference in treatment due to increased exudates and carbon being available within the soil as well. However, I also took measurements 3 weeks after treatment too, and the point is that wouldn't necessarily be in response to the recent death of those plant roots. So I will share that data once I have it available. But probably some of the response, the change in soil respiration, which I didn't actually observe any difference in respiration flush, would be in response to plant root.
Okay, let's see. There's a response in the chat from the Zaso representative about they launched a Zap Weeder battery-powered walk-behind device in Europe and a handheld XPH 30-meter cable, which can work with a tractor supply unit as an add-on. And the XPH would already be available with X-Power in the US. So thanks for that information. Let's see. What did the unit that you used sell for?
Well, you guys are gonna feel bad now. We bought it in 2019, 2020. It was $50,000.
Oh, wow.
The
Okay.
life was a lot better back then. It's very different price today. I don't know. I haven't bought one since last time. Still working.
We have a few more minutes, so if anybody has any more questions, please type them in. But if not, I just want to remind everyone that the recording will be available within a week on the eOrganic YouTube channel and the project website. And then we have the project website there in case you have any questions afterwards and want to contact any of us. Okay, well, thank you for everyone who have typed resources and information into the chat here. And thanks to all the presenters, especially the PhD students who've presented today. Our YouTube channel has some videos from the PhD students as well, which you can watch. They're on an electric playlist on the electric weeding playlist on the eOrganic YouTube channel. So thanks everyone for joining us today. We really appreciate you coming, and we look forward to future webinars as we have more information on the research. Thanks very much.